Growing Up Weird.
Hello and welcome to Growing Up Weird with Greg Dickens.
That's me.
And me, Gwen Bradbury. On this podcast, we discuss different aspects of how Western child rearing practices affect long-term adult health. We explore current news on this subject, and at the end of each episode, I give some small tweaks that might help you set your children up for better physical health throughout their lives. I'm the author of the book Growing Up Weird, and I write weekly Substack articles. In these podcast episodes, my partner Greg quizzes me about different aspects of the articles. Let's start with the news. Greg, what have you been reading?
I've been reading a really interesting paper. This is kind of a preprint. And as is very common for medical papers, it's in the Journal of Public Economy. Ando, Mori and Yamaguchi out of the University of Tokyo had a look at some people who had had preschool education in social and emotional skill, and whether or not they ended up being charged with a violent offence while they were juveniles. Yeah.
Freaking love this!
See where this is going?
Right, okay. So hang on, preschool education in social emotional skills.
Yep.
And so juvenile conviction of a crime.
They're looking at kids before the age of, say, 3.5-ish,
Okay.
4 maybe, and then later, say, between the ages of 15 and 18.
Okay, all right.
And they saw a drop. Such a surprise. But they saw a drop of 34% between people who had been given this preschooling in social and emotional skills and those who hadn't. And that's fine. You'd expect that. But people who have been listening to this podcast for a couple of weeks will know that I have brought you a range of n=6 type, low-size papers where they've tried their best to suck out as much information per person as possible. This is n=110 million.
110 million?
110 million. The authors of this study have spent years combing through all but one of Japan's 47 prefectures.
Whoa.
And examining the data up to 1970.
Wow.
The scale of what they tried to do here was enormous. And the reason they had to do that is that Japan has a very low rate of violent crimes in teenagers especially. Much, much lower than basically anywhere else. And so to find the effect of this, they had to have a huge trial size because it's such a tiny thing to get power on. But they found it. If you have time to have a look at the May edition of the Journal of Public Economy, possibly Public Economics, I'm not sure, you will see a paper by Ando, Mori and Yamaguchi. It's fascinating, and they have a really interesting discussion on what it is about the formal education of social and emotional skills to very young children that makes a difference to later behaviour, and why doing it to older children doesn't work as well.
So, folks, Greg and I never tell each other about the article that we're going to talk about this week. So we can be a little bit surprised and we can really kind of engage in it as we would otherwise.
And 1 week it's going to catch us.
1 week. Yeah, we were saying 1 week it's going to catch us out. But what is really cool is that I was actually looking for a paper exactly on those lines today, because there's so much narrative around how bad childcare is and how, parents should be doing everything for their children, and childcare is bad, school's bad, etc. And actually I was kind of thinking, I wonder what there is that sort of slightly offsets that narrative, because otherwise you can just get quite a one-sided view. And so I'm presuming then that formal education of social and economic skills to 3-year-olds, great idea, social and emotional skills, these are within childcare settings.
Yeah,
right?
this was a government designed and rolled out system that was given to nurseries all over the place, and you can see where it was accepted and used, you get a bigger drop. Where it wasn't used very much, you get a smaller drop. You see the dates, so these kids about 12 years later, after the date it's rolled out, that's when you see the drop in offences. There's also a drop in teenage pregnancy, which might have something to do with risk taking. but the drop is more like 19%, not the 34% that's reported for violent offences.
Oh, fantastic. So, folks, if your children go to daycare, and ours do, they all have done for periods, including in Malawi and in other countries that we visited.
True.
Don't beat yourself up too much. There may be some also good things that come along with that.
Yeah, let's not beat ourselves up at
I
all.
know. I'm
in
not
fact.
saying it's bad. It's just that there is like quite a dominant narrative at the moment that daycare is always bad.
Yeah, and women shouldn't have jobs and should always bake an apple pie for when their husband gets home in the evening.
If you mention sourdough, I'm going to be very cross here because actually I do really like baking sourdough. But
I'm not going to.
so please don't go near the sourdough. But yeah, it's fine to talk about baking. That's okay. You can throw that one out.
Thank you. Well, that was my news. What's yours?
Having looked for a paper along the lines of yours and not found one, didn't comb the Journal of Public Economics well enough. I found a paper that has the title "A Footwear Choice and Locomotor Health Throughout the Life Course, a Critical Review."
Oh, come on.
I know, the paper we have all been waiting for. This is by Doubt et al. In the Journal of called Healthcare. Not the journal called Healthcare, a journal called just Healthcare.
The journal Healthcare.
The journal Healthcare. Thank you. Those prepositions, they always catch me up. And why I was really excited about this one is that if you look at the literature on, barefoot or minimal footwear, and you look at it on, the right sort of shoes for running, typically the studies are quite small scale, looking at very specific outcomes, and it's hard to kind of zoom out and see the big picture. But these authors from the University of Liverpool have done a cracking job of reviewing loads and loads of different literature, looking at lots of different aspects of kind of traditional Western shoes, looking at whether there are health benefits or otherwise, looking at kind of minimal footwear, looking at barefoot populations. They've looked at the epidemiological studies, so the ones where you just look at different populations and compare them. They've looked at kind of controlled interventional studies where you are doing something to a group and seeing what changes. They've got a whole great big section on childhood and gait development. Brilliant. I absolutely loved it. But what was great is that they said that they found little evidence for health benefits of most typical shoe design features, so cushioning, heels, arch support. Little evidence.
Hang on. Little evidence for health benefit.
Yep. For normal walking in healthy individuals. So this is how healthy individuals spend most of their time.
Not for they protect you if you fall off a wall.
No,
or something.
exactly. Very specifically, not about running, not about sports, just looking at
Daily wear.
And I
right.
think that's really important here because obviously there's so many other questions that are asked about footwear and different sports need very different, your feet need to be doing very different things. But anyway, it says they found very little evidence of health benefits of most typical shoe design features for normal walking in healthy individuals. And in several cases, like for high heels, there was evidence of bad health effects.
And is that compared to barefoot?
This is, they took barefoot as being the default evolutionary movement of feet, which
Fair enough, yeah.
is
That
pretty
makes sense.
fair. And, there are lots of populations, there are quite a few populations in the world where barefoot and minimal footwear is still the norm. And also cultures in which kind of traditional shoes are much less structured than others. But I think the conclusion was particularly cool, which was, based on currently available evidence, we recommend minimal footwear as the default for the general population to stimulate healthy biomechanical ageing, with other types of footwear used infrequently or when there is an individual or clinical need. And I'm just like, yes, yes, it's so clear, it's so straightforward, and it's so much common sense, right?
I can see why it was in the journal Healthcare.
Yeah, in the journal Healthcare. I love it. But yeah, I mean, I've got a post on shoes and how shoes affect how children move and how adults move. There will definitely be more to come. But I just read this and every paragraph I was like, yes, thank you. Bodies are evolved to have feet that move like feet.
Yeah, that's cool. And I think, invest in proper barefoot shoes. I have been running around in 10 quid eBay knockoffs for a very long time and going through the soles every 25 minutes. But a paper like that, I think, could push me into actually investing in some good ones.
Yeah, I think I would say, though, that there is a very big range of stuff that is bracketed under minimal footwear. And so I just prefer the more minimal that I can, apart from when it's really cold.
Yeah.
And then, below 5 degrees. Too cold for my completely open sandals.
There are also the signs on shops that say no shirt, no shoes, no service. So I have to wear shoes sometimes.
Really? Have you ever seen that?
I have.
Have you ever? Were you not wearing shoes at the time?
I wasn't wearing a shirt at the time.
Oh, okay.
It was on a beach.
Yeah, you don't. But people don't expect you not to be wearing shoes in the middle of a city, so you're absolutely fine.
But it's true. They'll never know what's coming.
They'll never know. Anyway, Greg. So, what are we actually talking about this week?
Right. Well, I read your most recent article, and I enjoyed it, as I often do. And I think it's about time that we talked about gross motor skills versus fine motor skills, what they are, why we need them, all of that good stuff. You up for this?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay. We're also going to try and come in on time because we haven't yet managed it at all in the entire history of the podcast.
Oh.
This is meant to be a half-hour thing, and I don't think we've come in under 38 minutes so far.
Keep going.
Okay. Sorry. Right, fine. Guinevere, what is the difference between gross motor skill and fine motor skill?
So, gross motor skills means the really big movements that your bodies do, not with the little twiddly appendages on the end of your hands. So, think arms, back, neck, legs, not fingers. It's just fingers, fine motor? I think it is just fingers.
I think lips might count.
Don't remember seeing that on the NH.
I think lips are fine motor. There's a certain speech element to this, surely.
Yeah, that falls under speech therapy. And
sorry.
yeah, Greg, come on.
Okay.
It's siloed here.
Fingers and wrists. Fine, whatever. So gross motor is what, hitting a ball, and fine motor is writing a letter.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, we're all familiar with why fine motor skills are very important, because writing letters is how you end up at university and end up getting a job and then losing that job to AI in the future. But whatever. Fine motor skills, important. Gross motor skills, important?
Yes, super important. But somehow we kind of forget them in our race to get ahead, especially academically. There seems to be so much focus, not even just, we talk, daycare, when they're like, they're doing small amounts of craft and they can make a letter O. Yes, that's fine motor, that is good. But it's also the toys that you buy. So many toys, right? They say, helps develop fine motor skills. I've seen it for apps as well. You get your kid to wiggle their finger, and that's developing fine motor skills. Yes, it is. But if they're not built on a foundation of really good gross motor skills, then the fine motor skills are so much harder to build, and they're likely not to be as strong. If you can't hold your arm in the right position, it doesn't really matter what your fingers are doing. If they're in the wrong place, the fine motor skills are still terrible.
Okay, so I'm kind of imagining a darts player in a pub at this point. Like, fine motor skills, can put the dart in the treble 20. Gross motor skills, can get up from the floor to throw the dart in the first place. Got it? So, am I understanding this right? Your platform onto which you build your fine motor skills are your gross motor skills.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a kind of stacking effect, whereas I think often people sort of see them as kind of two parallel tracks. Or we should do some gross motor and we should do some fine motor. Well, actually, we should really build the gross motor, and then the fine motor is kind of the cherry on top.
Okay, I get it. So a big foundation of gross motor. We should go into these terms, by the way. Gross is just old Latin for big, and fine is just weird twiddly Victorian English for small. Small motor skills, big motor skills. Fine. You've got a lot of big motor skills, your gross motor skills, onto which you can then build your small motor skills. I get it. What are the other advantages of gross motor skills?
So, when you are small, say up until the age of 6 or 7...
I think you mean fine.
I'm fine now, Greg. Aren't I?
That is true. She is fine.
So, when you are a young child, having good gross motor skills means that you are less, quote unquote, clumsy. You're less likely to fall, scrape your knee, hurt yourself. As you get a bit older, you'll find that whatever sport you do, you can take up and you can do well at it, even without much practice. You're still able to play the sport straight away because your body just knows how to move. I'd say those are probably the big ones about gross motor skills in childhood, Greg.
I think that's fair. Let's do the proper growing up weird thing then. How do these childhood effects turn into adulthood health?
So if you've built good gross motor skills in childhood, you then have developed gait patterns that are effective and that are efficient and that you're using your body in the way it expects. So you're able to move around comfortably. You're able to, cover distances. You are able to move and be physically active easily and comfortably. And what that translates to, as you move throughout life in exactly the same way the paper was talking about with the shoes earlier, it translates into quote unquote healthy biomechanical aging. So because you are using your body in the way it expects, your joints last well, your muscles last well, you retain strength, you retain easy movement, and that means that as you get older, you don't have the same loss of movement and the same frailty that you might get if your gross motor skills hadn't been built well in childhood.
Nice. Okay, well then let's talk about building them well in childhood. What is it kids should be doing to build gross motor skills?
Well, so if you read what the NHS says, they list 7 categories of gross motor skills for babies. And these are tummy time, that's lying on your front, rolling, sitting, moving from lying to sitting, crawling, moving into standing and walking. And I had a look at this because I was actually quite curious. What is it that parents are told they should be doing? What are the kind of important movement skills they should be focusing on when the children are small? And looking down that list, Greg, I just felt there was an area of the body that was a bit neglected.
It does all feel somewhat south of the equator.
Yes, precisely. Great expression, by the way, I like it. But yes, so very much focused on kind of leg and core a bit, I guess, but almost nothing to do with the arms.
Yeah, the shoulders are left out.
Shoulders are really left out. And yes, they mentioned crawling, and crawling does use shoulders, but actually we know there are quite a lot of children who don't crawl, who bum shuffle until they're able to stand up. And in a lot of cultures, actually, crawling is really disincentivised because they don't want babies crawling around in the dirt. It's much easier to have a child that is on adults until they start walking. So crawling, we know, doesn't happen for all children. And then the only other 2 that are related to arm movement are moving from lying to sitting. Yeah, as we know from sitting on the floor for giving up chairs for Lent, we do know that that is an ask on the upper body. Same with moving into standing. But none of this puts the arms above the head.
Okay,
and
what does?
I'm going to stop.
I'm sorry.
Just hold your horses. The reason that is important to get your arms above your head is because there is no movement that your body can do that is optional, that can be completely removed without consequence, because he's looking around, it's like, can I think of an counterexample? And please feel free to push back here. But I would say that joints expect to move around their range of motion. So saying, right, I'm just not ever going to move my arms above my eye level, that is a problem.
Yeah, sure.
But I think it goes even further than that, because fundamentally, Greg, a very long time ago, your ancestors were monkeys. And actually, when we look at how human bodies are built, there are certain mechanical loads that different parts of our body expect. And for our legs, it's quite easy to see because we're walking around. Those loads are primarily compressive. So the body is putting weight down through the legs. But with the exception of, I think, a single, very unusual culture, most of us do not move around using our arms on the floor typically. So the kind of compressive load piece doesn't really make sense from an arm perspective. But given we are primates and we have evolved from monkeys, the loads that monkey arms require are tensile. So they are the loads that come from hanging rather than from compression.
First off, are you implying there's a quadrupedal culture?
There is, yeah.
What?
I feel like it was in an area of Turkey, but I can't remember, where even adults still crawl around.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm Googling that later. Second, as a primate vet here, ex-primate vet, I should point out that Gwen is absolutely right that the tensile loading of the forelimb is critical for every primate I've ever met, but they also carry a lot of compressive load through those forelimbs. Mm-hmm. So monkeys spend a lot of time hanging, and then they go and stand on top of a branch, or they walk around on all fours, and then they hang off something. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you're completely right. The forelimbs need to be under tension, but they will also need to be under compression.
Well, that's great, because these skills on here, lying to sitting, crawling and moving into standing, all of these are compressive loads rather than tensile loads. I mean, moving into standing sometimes could be a tensile load.
If you've got your house set up right.
If you've got your house set up right, yeah, exactly. Most kids are pushing themselves up on furniture. Sometimes they're pulling themselves up on their parents, which is great. That is a good tensile load. But other than that, when I look down this list of movement skills, it looks like the hanging from the arms is a very glaringly obvious omission. And I think sometimes because we don't have many opportunities in our culture, because we don't have low-hanging branches, we don't have loads of creepers, we have houses which are very much kind of two-dimensional spaces. We think about a floor area rather than the kind of vertical space.
There are things we walk on, and then you go upstairs and then there's another thing you walk on.
Yeah, exactly. So we sort of have this really big cultural blind spot around what children need. But certainly when we were travelling, do you remember kids hanging off literally everything that bounced?
I remember kids doing very little else.
Yeah, exactly.
If there's any resonant thing, a branch, a creeper, a bit of a sign, whatever, there will be a child hanging on it bouncing.
Yeah. And not just older children too. I mean, the toddlers were some of the most vigorous bouncers as well.
That's true.
Like they totter on their legs and then they bounce for ages. There's a reason that baby bouncers are a thing. We've talked about how not great for hips, etc. But babies love bouncing. And actually, when they've got the opportunity, babies that are only just able to stand will absolutely delightedly hang off things, but it's not even mentioned in this list of gross motor skills, Greg.
Do you know why?
Why do you think?
I don't know. No. I have empty head, no thoughts. I was just wondering if you knew, because to me, that sort of an omission, that looks deliberate. I can't work it out. Is it the whole 1 in 100 kids will dislocate their elbow hanging off something, or 1 in 1,000 kids, and that's enough that it's not worth the NHS putting on the list?
I don't know. I mean, clearly there is kind of cultural upheaval when it is suggested that babies can hang from their arms, which I will tell you, as a veterinary surgeon, I was taught in lectures that you can hang a newborn baby from a washing line because their grip strength is so good. And that is entirely true. But there is cultural hysteria when we do talk about, kids suspending their own body weight. But I actually think I don't think that is necessarily, that degree of hysteria is coming from the healthcare service. I actually think that is a parental panic and an over-extrapolation. I think it comes from a culture in which we've historically, we put babies in cots, we keep them, we sort of have these kind of rarefied little orchid babies that we protect in their little, perfectly adjusted greenhouses, and we feed them, special science stuff. And then, they grow up and we protect them. Do you remember we've talked before about the kind of idea of a body as a statue versus a body as a tree?
Yeah.
Do you remember how did we explain that one?
Well, the major thing here is if you want the strongest statue possible, you protect it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you want the strongest tree possible, you test it.
Yeah.
And you push it and you pull it and you expose it to mad winds and all that. There's the difference between a statue and a tree. Here, if we're going to finish this on time, we've got to move on. Let's get past statues and trees.
Past statues and trees.
You are telling us how to give kids the best gross motor basis possible. And I'm hearing, give them something to hang from. Give them
something to hang from. I'd say that was my biggest recommendation to parents to help children have better physical movement throughout life, reduce risk of shoulder injuries in adulthood, reduce risk of distal radial fractures, so breaking the bottom of the lower part of your arm, which is scarily common in women my age. But trying to basically creating arms that are going to last through your lifespan is super important. So something to hang from. I'd say if you've got a young baby, try carrying them in your arms more. Obviously, we often default to a pushchair or a sling, but if you're holding a baby and walking, the baby hangs on to your clothes, they hang on to you. One time I was in the Gambia, I don't think you were with me, but I was with the younger two. We were walking along and this 12-year-old came along with her friend, and the 12-year-old was carrying a baby of maybe 10 months on her back. But I hope it was a little sister, but the baby was just hanging on to her back. There was no cloth. She was not holding the baby in any way. The baby was had legs wrapped round and arms wrapped round, completely unattached. And my mind was blown, and I kind of watched them, and I was like, so obviously the first thing I do, pick up my 2-year-old. I'm like, right, get on my back and hold on. And she's holding on going, Mummy! She managed to grab it. She's like, I'm going to fall. And I was like, oh, how did that baby do it? It was incredible. But they have so much potential to properly hold on if they need to. So arm carry, where you can, try doing it quite deliberately. That's great for upper body strength. I've talked about hanging. If you've got parks nearby you, if you've got monkey bars, spend as much time as possible there. That is great. And, think about where in your house you can put things for your kids to hang on, pull-up bars, strong shelves. If you've got space to put monkey bars or anything like that, brilliant, put them in, because your child's body will thank you in the decades to come.
Is this another more people should have a climbing wall where they've got a TV sort of argument?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I've heard that argument before, but I love it.
I've heard it said that a TV requires a feature wall. Yeah, you've got a wall for your TV.
Yeah.
If you didn't have one, you could have a climbing wall there instead. I think I heard that on a climbing forum. Anyway, okay, grand. So that's upper body. You reckon lower body's pretty well covered. Mm-hmm. Get kids walking and running and jumping.
Yeah, we'll talk about this in a different episode. Yeah, we're talking arms today.
Gross motor skills.
Onto
which you build your fine motor skills. Then you write your letters. Then you go to university, and then you lose your job to AI. I'm sorry. There's been a lot of AI in the news recently. Okay, let's be more uplifting then. Can I give you a question from a listener?
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
We had this one in from a listener in the Netherlands who says, should nurseries ban common allergens?
Ooh, that's a minefield one. Well, Greg, I think it depends whether we're thinking about the nursery protecting themselves from being sued or the children having good long-term health.
What does each one give you? What are the outcomes of each answer?
So, the risk to nurseries if they serve allergens and a child has an allergic reaction is really, really high. So I can see that if they want to avoid litigation, they should not serve allergens. But that's an enormous consequence for all the other children who don't have allergies.
Why?
Because early life exposure to allergens and repeated exposure to allergens reduces the risk that a child suffers from food allergy. So if we, as a society, decide to cut out things that kids could be allergic from their diets, we're likely to only worsen the epidemic of food allergy.
But you don't think that nurseries should put themselves on the line of fire here? To be honest, neither do I. Because one lawsuit and they get shut down.
Yeah.
Should nurseries ban common allergens? Probably yes. Should we change the law so they don't have to do that? Probably also yes, right?
Yeah.
Fair enough. That's it. We're done. And bang on time too.
Amazing.
First time ever.
Way.
Do you want to close us down or shall I?
Oh, I'll pass it back to you, Greg.
Folks, you have been listening to me, Dr. Greg Dickens, talking to Dr. Gwen Bradbury. This has been Growing Up Weird, and we'll see you next time. Oh, one final thing to add. Next week is Easter. We are taking an Easter break, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Well, hear you. Anyway, bye.